Hello, everyone. My name is Nasrin Sultana, and I'm a CSPC Program Committee volunteer. We are about to start the panel titled Navigating the New Frontier, Global Alignment on Research Security, organized by Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. This year, CSPC provides simultaneous translation and closed captions for all panels in both French and English. Please scan the QR code on the banner to download the app and access subtitles in your preferred language. Please use your own device and headphones. We do have the conference mobile app. Feel free to download the CSPC 2024 app available in the App Store or Google Play. Please remember to tweet about your favorite events and panels at the conference using Science Policy and CSPC 2024 hashtag. Finally, please don't forget to fill out the evaluation survey for each of the sessions this morning in the program app or by scanning the QR code displayed on each session slide using the session number shown on the screen. Your feedback helps us to improve the conference for next year. Enjoy the panel, and thank you for being here. Now, I would like to give the floor to Valerie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Valérie Latraverse. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, SSHRC. I think most of you know that acronym. I am replacing Manal Bahubeshi, who's the Vice President of Research and Technology Partnerships at NSERC. She wasn't feeling well today, but she sends you her best wishes, and I throughout the course of the conversation, you'll understand that NSERC has played quite a critical role in advancing our research security policy and implementation at the granting councils. But we've worked very, very collaboratively as three councils. I will now speak in French. Je voulais remercier le Centre sur les politiques scientifiques canadiennes pour leur accueil et pour l'excellente conférence que leur équipe a organisée jusqu'à présent, ainsi qu'à vous tous pour votre participation à cette session ce matin. J'aimerais aussi commencer par saluer les peuples autochtones de tous les territoires sur lesquels nous nous trouvons aujourd'hui. D'un océan à l'autre, nous reconnaissons les territoires ancestraux et non cédés de tous les peuples inuits, métis et des Premières Nations qui se sentent chez eux sur cette terre. Comme nos panélistes viennent de partout autour du monde aujourd'hui, du Canada, des États-Unis, du Japon, des États-Unis et de la Suède, notre session se déroulera en anglais, mais sentez-vous libre de poser des questions en français et en anglais par la suite, et nous ferons de notre mieux pour traduire la question ainsi que la réponse. So as I mentioned, I'm Valérie Latraverse. I'm with SSHRC, and it's really my pleasure today to moderate this international panel organized by NSERC to discuss opportunities for further global alignment on research security. This is a file, as I mentioned, that we've been fully engaged in at SSHRC. As you know, we also manage the tri-agency programs, and there's been some great collaboration with NSERC, CIHR, and the Canada Foundation for Innovation in the last couple of years, and we've adopted a harmonized approach to research security, working across with partners across the federal government, public safety, ISED, and many others, and it's been a truly collaborative effort. So as much as we've collaborated and aligned at the domestic level, today the conversation is more about alignment at the international level. So many efforts have been made to cooperate on research security, to develop shared principles and resources. And all of these initiatives tend to align on a set of core principles: that research security measures should be developed in dialogue with the research community, and that they should be risk proportionate, respect academic freedom, and avoid all forms of discrimination. They also state strongly that international collaboration and openness are essential, and that research must remain as open as possible and as secure as necessary. These ongoing dialogues with international partners are critical so that we can align on key principles and values as we navigate this new frontier, and so that we can exchange information on best practices and lessons learned. Ultimately, research security is still relatively new for all of us. We embarked on this journey, I guess, a couple of years ago, probably more in the public safety agencies, but for us, still relatively new, and we're learning as we move along. So today we'll spotlight research security frameworks implemented by funders in different countries, as I mentioned, from Canada, UK, Japan, and Sweden, to share key challenges and emerging best practices and discuss opportunities for further global alignment on research security so that we can support our researchers to conduct their research responsibly through meaningful and mutually beneficial international collaborations. So with that, I will introduce our speakers, who will each provide a short presentation, and then we'll transition to a moderated question and answer period, and we'll be, at that point, I will invite you to, I don't see microphones, but we'll get to that point. First, I'd like to introduce Sean McGurk, who is the Director of Research Security at NSERC. So from Canada, Sean's been leading much of this effort, so thank you for your work. Rebecca Kaiser, Chief of Research Security and Strategy Policy at the National Science Foundation in the United States. Not sure we have a visual of her yet, but hopefully she can hear us. Christopher Smith, who is the International Champion and Executive Chair of the Arts and Humanities Research Council from the UK Research and Innovation. Welcome to Canada.
Thank you.
Dr. Smith has been here for a few days now. We've had an opportunity to engage. We have Akira Tsugita, who is the Vice President of the Japan Science and Technology Agency, also virtually. I saw his face a few minutes ago, so there we go. Hi, Rebecca and Tsugita-san, welcome. And finally, Andreas Gothenberg, who is the Executive Director of the Swedish Foundation for International Cooperation in Research and Higher Education, otherwise known as STINT. So with that, I will ask Sean to present Canada's framework for research security. Each speaker has been given somewhere from 5 to 8 minutes, so we'll be watching that very closely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Valerie, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all these international speakers. I will try to present this relatively quickly. I think probably most people in this room are likely relatively aware of some of the research security measures that have been implemented in Canada. Hopefully this works, it does. And so while I won't go too in depth about some of the elements that Valerie has already mentioned, I will say that our approach to research security broadly has been informed by quite a bit of international engagement, notably at the level of the G7, but not only at that level. There are key principles that have been developed at that stage that we very closely endorse and follow. And the way that we define research security for our purposes across the agencies, and also in close alignment with other agencies and departments across Canada, is as a set of actions that can safeguard research integrity and safeguard the core values through which we engage in research, as Valerie mentioned: academic freedom, reciprocity, transparency, merit, openness, and the list goes on. And so while this is in many cases focused on economic security and national security, there are also broader implications of this in terms of ensuring that our researchers do kind of retain control over their research, that their research has as much impact as possible as well. And so in Canada, we see this as a truly shared responsibility from the government, across the funding agencies, with research institutions, and at the level of researchers as well. Importantly, not everything can be done or limited or restricted or addressed through policy at a funding agency level. There's quite a bit that's been done over the last 5 to 6 years, approaching 7, I'd say, in Canada, to develop a lot of guidance towards this. Oh, great, the slides are now in front. And so really the focus is to ensure that this never leads to discrimination, that the measures that we're putting together are always proportionate to the risk, that they're well understood and implementable, and always balanced with our existing and shared commitments, including to openness, broadly open science, and EDI. And so to present a very brief timeline, so we across the agencies have started becoming engaged in this largely on the behest of universities who called on the government to create a Government of Canada Universities Working Group on research security in late 2018. And we were engaged from the start in that work and did quite a bit of engagement over the first few years to try to really understand what this new and emerging topic, and I would say still emerging now, is, to be able to speak from a common language across the research space, across the security space, and try to understand the intersection. And over time, developed quite a bit of guidance collaboratively with the university community through this group, which led to the publication of the Safeguarding Your Research portal in 2020. And this has been continually updated over time. I have a obligatory picture of our president, Alejandro Adam. He has a video on the portal explaining a lot of the core principles behind this. But there is quite a lot of guidance. To be fair, at this point, for somebody who's very new to this is actually quite a bit of reading. But there are training courses that are fully available for free on research security, on cybersecurity, on how to do open source due diligence. There's additional guidance that's developed just about every year on how to mitigate security risks, on how to identify those risks, and even broadly guidance for other funding organizations and research organizations across Canada to, again, try to promote alignment. And this portal is hosted by our colleagues at ISAD, who have been doing truly phenomenal work on this. And so this, there is an undercurrent throughout all this of maintaining a strong alignment on open science as well. And while I won't read them out, I have kind of pulled out snippets from multiple of these resources that were developed over time, which continually bring in this continued adherence to the core values that ensure that we can maintain a very strong research community while adding this new concept of research security as an additional principle through which we can continue to advance our research as securely as possible while maintaining that openness. And so since then, since 2021, things have advanced much more rapidly. So in 2021, there was a ministerial requirement to develop an approach to secure research with private sector partners. The National Security Guidelines for Research Partnerships were developed, again, with the same universities working group, and applied as a pilot to NSERC's Alliance program in July of 2021. In 2022, there were federal investments to support the full implementation of this new policy, as well as to develop a research security center to help support universities directly. There is now additional work being done with institutions from the college sector as well to try to build capacity and engagement and awareness there. As well, there was an additional stream added to one of the programs of the Research Support Fund, which is managed at the Tri-Agency Institutional Program Secretariat at SSHRC, to help create this capacity at our research institutions as well. In 2023, we conducted a review of the guidelines with ISAD, with public safety and our other partners, and in consultation with the community, and updated the risk assessment form under the National Security Guidelines for better clarity, ease of use, and publish new guidance on how to conduct open source due diligence to try to make this process as transparent as possible yet again. And then in 2024, in January of this year, we had the publication of a new policy on sensitive technology research and affiliations of concern. There's an R missing in there, which combines two lists, a list of sensitive technology research areas for which if a research grant is aiming to advance one of those areas, and it is the intentionality of the aiming to advance that is important there, that then an additional component applies to the research grant where researchers must not have current and ongoing affiliations or receive support from a list of named research organizations. And to support all of this, again, working very closely with the community, we developed new tri-agency guidance around both of these policies, as well as outlining the key principles through which we engage in this work. So in order to try to make this as transparent as possible and as streamlined as possible, really the way that this is being implemented is through two key questions. The first policy, STRAC, which applies to the majority of our programs at this point, asks, will the research aim to advance a sensitive technology research area as listed? If it does not, there are no additional requirements. If it does, then, as I mentioned, there is a restriction on affiliations of researchers involved in that research. For this, it addresses risks related to the intersection of these two elements, so sensitive research performed with high-risk research organizations. In practice, we ask applicants to submit a very simple one-page attestation form and try to make this as straightforward as possible. And compliance is ensured by a validation process, which will likely start next year on grants that have already been awarded, so trying not to have any impact on any timing for our funding programs and making sure that we're still running our programs on time. As for the national security guidelines, this applies to a small number of programs that fund research with private sector partners, asking, will the research involve a private sector partner? If not, there are no requirements. If it does, then there is a form, which again has been streamlined over time following feedback from the community, asking for identification of risks associated with the research and with the partner, and then asks for a tailored risk mitigation plan to address any risks that have been found. And this is a stepwise process where we ask the applicants to submit this to us. We have teams within each of the granting agencies that will then review, and then we have a capacity to share the application with our colleagues at Public Safety Canada through their Research Security Centre to ask for further advice if needed. And the goal is always to get to a yes and try to mitigate risk wherever possible. And as such, it has actually become quite rare that we do not fund a grant for reasons of national security. And so this addresses risks, again, at an intersection, sensitive research, and the potential for illicit knowledge transfer through private sector partner organizations. There is a risk assessment form in the application stage, and for this, there is a risk assessment review process, which is completely transparently described online that applies at the application stage. And just very briefly, all of this is supported now by a research security center, which has been inspired by many other initiatives that have been set up around the world, notably the RCAT in the UK, which Christopher may discuss. They help us to implement these policies. They give us advice as needed, but they also have now a network of regional advisors that work with institutions, many of which have also now set up research security offices to support their researchers. And now we have a very matrixed environment where we all try to work together and communicate effectively to continue building awareness on this important priority. So I will leave it there, and we'll pass it right along to our next speaker, which I believe will be Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Sean. Good morning, everyone. And I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person. But I think I have it better than Sugita-san, where it's late at night. So it's absolutely fine. And I look forward to talking to you about what we're doing at the National Science Foundation in research security and across the US government. I do have some slides that I believe are going to be pulled up. We have been focusing on these efforts since 2017. And my office, the Office of the Chief of Research Security, Strategy and Policy, or the OCRIS, was established in 2020 to focus on research security. Within the United States government, we have coordinated and have concluded a policy called National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, NSPM 33, which was concluded in January of 2021 with implementation guidance in January 2022. And we're very busy implementing the requirements from this presidential memorandum, as well as legislative requirements from the CHIPS and Science Act. What we focus on the most in our overall goal is to create a research security culture within the United States and work with our international partners to implement this culture in partnership with the research community across the globe. So NSPM 33, as I mentioned, has a definition of safeguarding the research enterprise against the misappropriation of research and development to the detriment of national or economic security, related violations of research integrity, and foreign government interference. This is quite similar to the definition that Sean had told you about that we coordinated through the G7. So you can see a lot of synergy here already internationally. Next slide, please. And overall, the coordination and ensuring that we maintain the openness of our research ecosystem, as well as focus on research security, as emphasized in the G7, has been top of mind to us in the United States. And of course, we're doing this with our international partners. Next slide, please. So overall, the thing that we noticed the most was that our research community itself, they needed more information. They needed the tools themselves to be able to identify and assess and mitigate risk in research security, and they needed a forum for engagement. So we've created a center called Secure, safeguarding the entire community in the US research ecosystem. And if you go to the next slide, we have funded this center, and it's actually operated by those in the community itself. And its mission is to empower the research community to make security-informed decisions about research security concerns by providing information, developing tools, and providing services, with the audience being universities, nonprofits, and small and medium-sized businesses. Now, this is actually in the CHIPS and Science Act that we are required to implement it. And I'm very glad that it is, because it shows, of course, that across the US government and in Congress, we're committed to working together with the community on research security concerns. Next slide, please. So the center itself is operated out of the University of Washington, with 5 regional centers as well that function to provide services across the country. We also have Secure Analytics, which is the provision of analytics tools to the community to assess and mitigate research security risks. The center was stood up in September of 2024, so it's still quite new. We have a 5-year award. There'll be more and more information coming out of the center and opportunities for engagement. And if you go to the next slide, it has a website now, securecenter.uw.edu. And it is going to be a way that inquiries can come in from the community. And it's going to be built out so that resources will be provided out to the community itself. Our next goal is then to do international networking from the Secure Center to other centers around the globe. And we're in active communication, and I know we'll talk more about that in the Q&A. Sean talked about STRAC and the process. We have TRUST, which is Trusted Research Using Safeguards and Transparency. And if you go to the next slide, this is our way at NSF, where we are going to assess potential national security risks to proposals in the research that we fund. And again, we're required to do this through several pieces of legislation. I won't go into these in detail, but we do have to identify this. Now, we chose to do a process. We did a study through a group called the JASON, which is a group of scientists in the United States who do work for the US government at the intersection of science and security. And they said it's very difficult to identify whole big areas of research that might have national security risks. So it's best to assess things on a project-by-project basis. And if you go to the next slide, we've developed a process based on those recommendations with the guiding principles of respect the science. So we want to get to yes. We don't want to decline good research proposals. So we want to focus on mitigation. I think about this as risk acceptance and risk mitigation rather than risk avoidance, so that we continue to fund the best research. If you go to the next slide. We have resources here. The process is done through assessing 3 different criteria. All of that is here on the website, so you can look into what we're doing. And we're piloting this process on quantum information science proposals that are coming into the agency, so that we can see how many resources it takes to do this process, because we have 45,000 proposals that come into NSF. So if we do things on a project-by-project basis, we have to be selective and assess things where we think there might be the most risk, and then negotiate appropriate mitigation plans when we do see that risk. And next slide, please. Lastly, I want to touch on the Research on Research Security program that we're starting to fund. And if you go to the next slide, we're starting a research program. And this is to respond to the fact that we feel that we need more rigorous research and results in the area of research security in order to help us create this research security culture. So this is going to be an entirely new research discipline. And we funded a workshop at Rice University in May. The workshop report is online. The next steps that we want to do is coordinate and collaborate with many international partners as well. We've been speaking, of course, with our Canadian and UK partners, our Swedish partners. We just had a workshop with Swedish partners in DC. We are talking, of course, to our Japanese partners as well, to look at ways we can coordinate and bring together researchers from across the globe. So we're going to hold another workshop with an international focus in this area. And next slide, please. The workshop had some recommendations for us that, again, we should stimulate international collaboration, which is what we're going to be doing, that we should promote research security networks, that networks are extremely important to include both researchers as well as research security professionals to do research projects in this area. And focus on research security as well as broader societal concerns. So here's some of the questions that we're thinking about. What's the relationship between stakeholders and maintaining competitive advantage? We say the US, but we would like to look at this, of course, in other countries as well, but also promoting and engaging in international collaboration. How can researchers increase international collaboration while maintaining a secure and effective research environment? And what is the relationship between research security governance and their intended outcomes? So more to come on this program, and I'm very excited about it. I'll stop there with my slides, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll pull down. Very good. Alors, je voudrais commencer avec mes remerciements à tous mes collègues canadiens pour l'invitation d'être ici pour cette conférence et participer à cette discussion très importante pour notre collaboration internationale et globale. That's about all my French for today, but thank you. So I want to start, if I may, just by talking about UKRI and what it is as an organisation. Just for a reminder, we were constructed to bring together all the publicly funded, or most of the publicly funded research and innovation in the UK, the subject-specific research councils, Innovate UK, and our physical infrastructure for research all into one body, which gives us a particular role in this area of trusted research and integrity. We are obviously, like other funders, closely related to government. In our terminology, we're a non-departmental public body. So our core budget comes from our Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. But we also operate across government. All of the departments will work with us in one way or another, which includes defence-related activity too. Our budget is somewhere over £8 billion a year, which is about half the total UK public spend on R&D. And the words ecosystem have already been used. We are very much part of an ecosystem that operates across through our universities, but also with business, public sector, third sector, and critically our international partners. In the course of this, I think I'm going to be saying a lot of things that we've heard from the Canadian and American, and no doubt from the Japanese and Swedish systems. And I think that that's an indication of the fact that we're sitting not only within our national ecosystems, but within global ecosystems where we are coming together in the degree of convergence in these areas. I'm the international champion for UKRI, and so my job is to promote international collaboration. We genuinely, absolutely believe that at the heart of UKRI and UK research and innovation must be an international global approach. Our higher education sector is a critical part of the UK domestic economy, but that higher education sector rests very strongly on its capacity to attract international students, but also deliver outstanding service to those international students at all levels, but also to collaborate internationally. And we know that the success of this system depends on the way that we can collaborate internationally right across the globe, and that has to be based on trust between communities, systems, and ways of working. And that's as true for our relations with colleagues, for instance, in North America, as it is for our colleagues in Africa. The principles are absolutely the same, that we have to work through trust and we have to have integrity in our relationships. You can see some of the statistics there about the importance of the international to our activities, and US, China, and Germany are critical partners, but Canada is the next on that list. So it's a very, very great pleasure to be here with you as our close colleagues. So like others, our commitment is to make sure that we can make international collaboration work. We're really, I love this phrase, get to yes. We want to see how we can make the collaboration successful. But we need to recognize that the geopolitics of the world and the way in which we need to advance in certain subjects requires safeguards and guidelines. So we too embrace the notion of being as open as possible and as secure as necessary. We focus on proportionality in our response. And I think the important thing is that it's easy for these to become binaries, so that you're either open or you're secure. But as I think all the speakers so far, and indeed afterwards I'm sure, will show, is that this isn't a binary. It's a process whereby you can do both. You can find a way to secure research that is nevertheless then available and making a difference in the world. All of our processes and the Trusted Research and Innovation Work Programme that we've introduced are designed to be country agnostic. So we don't start with the principle of making regulations around a particular country, but we design them around key strategic areas of the UK economy. And some of you will be aware of the important document, the Integrated Review, which has been revised once, which has been a guide for us to participate in important and useful ways in the world. So the wider UK landscape for trusted research and integrity, we have overall UK government advice, which gives us a strategic steer. We have technical agencies which can provide governance and support, and RCAT, the Research Collaboration Advice Team, has been mentioned already, may come up again. A really important relationship that we've been able to construct, which sits between government, us as a funder, and universities. So trying to raise awareness right across the ecosystem of the concerns. The responsibility sits with universities and research organizations, obviously, because they are closest to the activity. They need to ensure that they are meeting the wider compliance requirements, for instance, any sanctions and export controls. And obviously, that is built around a set of legislations, the National Security Act, and so forth. So all of those give us a kind of structure and a support service. And the role, I think, of UKRI is to facilitate knowledge and understanding to make things as easy as possible for our researchers. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to whiz through some slides very quickly because I think we'll get to the details subsequently. But just to give you an example, we have terms and conditions, for instance, that we have published in accompanying principles. We have 5 steps to trusted research and innovation, which is a kind of assessment framework that we give. And we're piloting those in collaboration with our universities. We have a training and communication program, which we have established, and which is obviously iterating over time and has to be properly nimble and agile as we work our way through the shifting geopolitics that we see. And we are collaborating with key international partners by sharing knowledge and best practice. And that, of course, is exactly what we're trying to do here by coming together and discussing the way that we can work. Our principles here focus on 3 main areas: the suitability of partners involved, how information and knowledge sharing is managed within collaboration, and the commercial application of a project's outputs. And within those 3, with those 3 main areas of consideration, I think we cover much of the same ground that our colleagues have outlined. So I'm going to stop there because I'd like to leave opportunity for conversation and hear others. Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
Sugita-san, I'll invite you to start your presentation.
Yep. Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Great. My name is Akira Tsugita from JST, Japan Science and Technology Agency, which is a government-affiliated funding agency. The research security has been one of the biggest topics of science policy in Japan, so I'm honored to be a part of such an important panel. I prepared a short presentation regarding research security in Japan, but please be noted that this presentation contains some personal views. Next slide, please. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we should be good.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's right. All right. This slide shows the brief history of research security in Japan. Over past years, Japanese government has done something to promote research securities. Important one is that the Japanese Cabinet Office released Research Integrity Policy Statement in 2021. Another one is the update of regulations on deemed export in 2022. This update means that regulations on knowledge transfer of sensitive technologies were strengthened. And earlier this year, a government expert panel released a report on countermeasures for leakage of sensitive technologies, which called for strengthening research securities. And the Cabinet Office is now mandated to prepare research security guidelines for academia and else. As a funding agency, JST has been carefully watching what our foreign counterparts are doing or trying to do on research securities. Next slide, please. This slide shows what Japanese government has done concerning research securities. And within the government, discussion on economic security policy was started back in 2020. And research security has been one of the topics of the economic securities. And Economic Security Act was passed Japanese Parliament in 2022. 1 year later, just as I mentioned, the Cabinet Office released policy statement, Policy for Ensuring Research Integrity. This statement was intended to foster transparency of public funded research and to develop risk management capacity at universities. Scientists who want to apply for public research fund should disclose work history, external support for his or her research, and current positions, including participation in a foreign recruitment program and else. At the same time, the statement asked universities and research institutions to develop risk management capacities within universities. And in May 2022, Japan's MERI, Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry, released a kind of directive to amend deemed export controls. This directive changed interpretation as to deemed exports. If a scientist wants to transfer knowledge of some sensitive technology to a person who is under some influence of foreign government or foreign entity, this transfer will be subject to a permission from METI. Needless to mention, this regulation, deemed export control, is strongly related to the research security. And earlier this year, a government expert panel on economic security released a report on prevention of sensitive technology leakage. This report mentioned that effort to improve research security for publicly funded research is needed in Japan. Based on the report, the Cabinet Office and other relevant ministries are mandated to prepare research security guidelines for universities, research institutions, and funding agencies. Next slide, please. And this slide shows what Japanese funding agencies and the universities have done concerning research securities. Based on research integrity policy statement, as I mentioned, when a scientist applies to any public research fund, he or she is requested to disclose he or his information about what kind of research fund he is receiving and what kind of positions he has, and to the institution he belongs. And in addition, universities and funding agencies are asked to introduce its own research integrity procedures. And major universities in Japan have established offices to take care of economic security related issues, including export control and research integrity. And the second one is based on updated deemed export control rules, transfer of information of sensitive technology to a person residing in Japan but under some influence of foreign entity is subject to permission from government. This is a big challenge for universities. It is quite often the case with Japanese top scientists that they heavily depend on foreign PhD candidates and postdocs for their researches. So they must care about the amended deemed export control rules, but they have almost no idea how they can figure out if such foreign PhD candidate and postdocs are under influence of foreign entities. And this kind of regulations usually result in decrease of international cooperation. And as a funding agency, JST has been discussing what kind of research security effort are appropriate to maintain or foster international cooperation. Next slide, please. This slide shows what we will do next regarding research security in Japan. At the policy level, government ministries concerned are mandated to prepare a research security guideline. I'm sure it will take a while, but they will do. In parallel, at JST, we will work to develop our own research security procedures as a trials. We believe this effort is essential to identify what we can do and what we can't. This is also useful to identify what kind of tools are available for us. But most importantly, we must make sure all stakeholders understand that the implementation of research security is essential to protect the openness and freedom of research. And we also must emphasize the importance of the dialogue between the academia and the government. Next slide, please. And this slide shows what kind of challenges we, JST, has to deal with. And I believe these are common challenges for all of us here, but approaches may vary. The first one is how to identify potential risks. Our government may be interested in preparing a list of sensitive technologies for identifying potential risks. And we may introduce some sort of the keyword screening. But I'm certain that we need dedicated effort to identify very small number of projects which mitigation will be applied. Assessing scientist affiliation, which means the open source, some sort of open source due diligence, is also difficult. And choosing appropriate mitigation is even more difficult, mainly because choice of mitigation is limited, and it is not easy to logically explain why this mitigation is appropriate for this type of risk. The securing resources for research security is another big challenge. So far, we don't have any designated budget for research security and trained staff for research securities. We need to negotiate with government. Increasing awareness of need for research security among scientists and staff at universities and funding agencies is the basis of our research security related activities. Scientists at universities typically want to believe that what they're engaged in is just fundamental and basic research. So we must improve the awareness of need for research securities. This directly related to the last bullet. We have to have all stakeholders clearly understand the purpose of research security. Again, let me reiterate, implementation of research security is essential to protect the openness and freedom of research. I'm sure these are just a part of issues to be solved. So any kind of suggestions and advices are highly welcomed. This is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. I'll invite Andreas Gothenberg to speak next.
Thank you. So thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be speaking in this panel on this important topic. I'm Andreas Gothenberg, Executive Director of STINT, and STINT is the Swedish Foundation for International Cooperation in Research and Higher Education. It's an independent foundation that was set up by an endowment from the Swedish government 30 years ago. And I will talk about how we are approaching research security with responsible internationalization. So we live in a turbulent world, which is complex, polarized, and unpredictable, with all these different issues affecting us. And if we look at the landscape when it comes to science, we can see that during the last 30 years or so, a lot has changed. Back in 1996, leading countries in science were basically democracies in Europe and North America, while today it's much more of a leveling playing field with excellent science being conducted in countries all over the world. And of course, these countries represent different political and cultural systems, which leads to friction and competition. On the other hand, the positive thing is that there are so many countries that can contribute to solve the global challenges that we're all facing and contribute to these SDGs. And SDG number 7 is in particular partnerships. However, this competition has led to changing policies. So if we look on EU level, back in 2015, from EU side, it was open innovation, open science, open to the world, and then just 6 years later, it was tackling research and innovation, foreign interference. And from, if we say this governmental view, it's often that we look at collaboration between countries. But in reality, so much of research cooperation and scientific cooperation is driven by individuals and their international networks. So although it looks like cooperation between countries or universities, in reality, the view of the researchers are much more like this, where you don't really care about which country you work with and which university, but you work with a competent colleague somewhere in the world. And if that colleague moves to another country, then of course the network moves on to that country as well. But we've seen in proposals coming to us that sometimes researchers, and I would say it's not a great percentage at all, but few percent of applications, we see that researchers are maybe not thinking so much about the context where they are doing the research and how their research can, basically the implications of the research in different countries. So we wanted to raise awareness about this and also make it possible for researchers to work together in a responsible way. So we started around 2019, which is a similar timeline that our colleagues have been presenting here, to address responsible internationalization. So basically, help researchers to think about ethical aspects, cultural, political, and societal context where they are operating, legal context, who they are working with, and how they should work internationally, and also considering the institutional autonomy, which is very important. So together with 3 Swedish universities, we produced a document in 2020 called Responsible Internationalization, Guidelines for Reflection on International Academic Collaboration. And we got a lot of national and international attention. And interestingly, last May in 2023, it was mentioned in the New York Times as well. And internationally, we work closely with NSF and JST, NSERC, also UKRI, because we think this alignment is very important, although we are addressing it slightly in different ways, but obviously the goals are very similar. And so the idea here is really that we look a little bit broader than just research security, because we need to safeguard national research systems, but at the same time address global challenges and advance science. And given the world that we're living in, it's basically new set of problems, and we think that we have to solve them by developing new methods. And universities and researchers, they are and should be international in their DNA, and they are the ones conducting the international cooperations. And there's a new geopolitical situation that we need to address. So if you look a little bit more on the differences, we see that responsible internationalization have different aspects than research security. The focus is more on the integrity of research networks, while research security is more on the national level. The driver for responsible internationalization is discretionary responsibility, while research security is more compliance. And the point of the departure is more the networks, while of course research security again has more of a focus on the national research system. And the goals are also different. But I mean, together we need to combine these different aspects. So from Stint side, what we are doing now in 2024 is that we have started to fund the establishment of 2 research groups on responsible internationalization, because we think it's very important that the universities are engaged and involved. And I mean, as a funding organization, we support the development of generation of new research, and the universities should be the ones carrying that out. And again, here it's also contributing to building this culture in universities for responsible internationalization. We also think it's very important for university leaderships to have a better understanding of science policy and higher education policy in different countries, so that they can develop strategies more on the contextual information and evidence. So that's why we're also launching a program of Stint Science Fellows, which will basically be scientists that we will send to different regions of the world to look more particularly on science policy and related topics. So they can contribute with data for strategic decision makings in international corporations. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Just checking that my mic is working. Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really some great perspectives, some much alignment across the board. For this next part of the session, we will be taking questions and answers. So I do see a microphone over here, and is there another one? No. Anyway, if you do have a question, please feel free to go to the microphone at any time. But what I'll do is I'll start with, I have a couple of questions here that I'll ask the panelists. But if I see that one of you is standing at the microphone, we'll start taking your questions from the floor. So we've heard, that many of you have established the principles of research security, and a common point between you in terms of research security measures is that these should be developed through dialogue across the research community. And as such, we've seen a proliferation of international conferences, working groups, and coordination bodies that foster dialogue. I'm curious to know what your perspectives are on the state of the global dialogue on research security, and are there important voices missing from this dialogue or underrepresented in this dialogue that should be more engaged? And underrepresented in this context could be underrepresented voices in your own respective countries, or internationally, are there voices that should be engaged? So I'm going to ask Rebecca if she could please answer the question, and then I will feel free to weigh in if you wish after Rebecca gives us her first response.
Sure. Thank you, Valerie. I think we've made a great deal of progress in international coordination on research security related issues. We've all mentioned the G7 work, and there's actually going to be a G7 Security and Integrity of the Global Research Ecosystem conference in Italy by our Italian hosts in December. The OECD Global Science Forum is also having a conference in Australia in December, and a great deal of coordination has happened there. And our European Union colleagues have hosted several dialogues with many countries. What I think we need to do going forward is the broader reach beyond the most developed countries to bring others into this conversation. I think there have been fewer opportunities to have conversations with those in the Global South. The State Department has established a research security network in Africa, an African research security network. It's working to do a similar network in Southeast Asia and one in South America. But I think having conversations more broadly is extremely important because there are huge risks in foreign influence there, and we should strategize together about how we should do this. As far as groups to reach out to, I think what I've seen, and I've seen with all of our international partners, is that there is great increased awareness by those in university administrations at the leadership level. I think the challenge that we still have is the raising of awareness and the involvement of those at the researcher level, at the faculty level. And again, in this vision of creating a research security culture, it's extremely important to bring them in. I think the Secure Center, I think other centers that we're setting up are going to be able to help in that regard, but it's something else that we have to think more strategically about. And I have that front of mind when we're thinking about the Research on Research Security program. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else wish to comment? Andreas?
Yes, so is the mic? Yeah, it's working. Yes, I think it's very important to engage different communities, similar to what Rebecca was saying. And sometimes it tends to be that maybe this discussion is too much focused from the security side, and they actually, as I showed in my slide, forget about that the individuals, the researchers, are very important. And there might be a cultural difference between the security community and the academic community. So it's very important to have this kind of communication in between the different parties. But I think also, similar to what Rebecca said, to engage with other parts of the world as well, because after all, we're looking for how to collaborate together. And we need to build this culture and understanding for responsible cooperation. Because also now with so much focus on the security, there's a risk that researchers are avoiding international collaboration. And that is something that would be problematic if we want to solve the global challenges. We need to work together, and it's really harmful if, or actually it's not good if the researchers are avoiding international collaboration.
Thank you. And Christopher?
Two quick things. So the first, to build on what Rebecca and Andreas have said about the broader reach. I think it's important that we reflect on how we embed the principles we expect of others in our relations with new emergent countries in the research system. So there is so my version of saying, Andreas, what you've just said is that the risk of securitizing this is the only thing that we do is think it's a debate about how we can protect ourselves from bad actors. And we do need just to be aware of the way that we engage with others and the way that we genuinely build trust and exemplify integrity. So it's not just a security issue. So I think that's important. And that means that there's a basis that has to be of equitability. The bit that we've not talked about very much is industry and private sector. And I think that there's a great deal for us to learn, but there's also a great deal for us to understand. And I think both learning, but also encouraging transparency in that part of the work that we're doing is going to be essential, especially as we see the increasing research capacity of the private sector is, already very high, but growing, it seems to me. So for our collaborations through publicly funded research with the private sector, but also understanding what's happening in the private sector, that's a key part of the conversation, I think.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I noted different approaches in different countries. Canada, for example, having two separate sets of guidelines and making sure that all actors are engaged in the dialogue. So we'll take a question from the floor.
Hi. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, Sean Hughes. I work at Universities Canada. On the subject of research security, one of the things that we see in Canada and likely increasingly internationally is depending where you are in Canada, you're now in a position where you have up to 3 different forms you have to sign responding to different parts of provincial government, federal government, or potentially even another federal department. And so you're kind of layering things on, and then eventually as things are going internationally, you may have more policies that you need to adhere to as well. And especially we represent universities that are small, large. If I'm a smaller research team, I would not know how to get involved in a lot of these things. So I'm really curious. I know Sean has heard this question from me before, but for other countries, is there a lot of conversation of getting to a point maybe of reciprocity where you recognize the research security procedures of another country? They have a grant that's already followed their own country's research policy. So you don't necessarily have to go through that process over and over again. Because I don't think we'll ever get to a point where there's complete harmonization with all our policies because of all the different jurisdictions and the different legal realities as well.
I suppose it's other countries, isn't it? So from the UK point of view, we are engaged in those conversations. Rebecca mentioned G7. There's a lot of work in Science Europe around this sort of thing. UKRI and NSF are having those conversations. I don't think they're straightforward. If one looks at any of those agreements that we enter where we mutually recognize each other's regulations, they take a very long time to deliver in other areas. So I don't think we should assume that this is just simple, but I would say from our point of view, the conversations are happening. And I hope that in due course we can move forward in some levels of alignment.
If I can add briefly, this is definitely one of our top priorities, and I think one of the main reasons why we wanted to also have this panel to talk about how we can also not just align across each other, because we do need these shared values, but in practice that also means we need to try to simplify this to a certain level for our researchers and for research administrators as well. There is a very real possibility, and I think in many cases this has occurred, a creep of additional bureaucratic elements being added on. And the more complex this is, the easier it is for a researcher to just simply decide, you know what, I'm just not going to engage in international collaborations. It's easier to just not get into this. And that's really what we want to avoid out of all of this. And in fact, we had a lot of very fruitful conversations between all of us on this panel. I'll note notably with colleagues from STINT, including Andreas and folks from GSD and from the NSF at the Global Research Council earlier this year, really from that fundamental basis of how do we really think about not just research security, but responsible internationalization from this more positive end of how do we support researchers in setting up the best collaborations, the understanding all of the different considerations on each side and helping them to have these conversations. But then also I think between us as funders, it also behooves us as we're looking at even, for example, joint funding opportunities to talk about research security, not as an afterthought and saying, well, there's national approach A and national approach B and everybody has to apply to everything. But think about how do we work together and try to create a system where it's much easier for researchers to be, going to a conference, seeing a colleague and saying, you know what, we should be working together and understand the tools for how to get there.
I think if there could be like a global code of conduct for international cooperation, so probably driven, as Sean says, from funding agencies, because we have a role in promoting international collaboration. And then if we, through Global Research Council or so, could find a way of finding this kind of way of conducting research in a green field, and then we can discuss and focus on the more complicated collaborations, but having this green field where researchers can feel comfortable to work internationally.
Thank you. We'll take another question. I think this would be our last question, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Nils Peterson from the GlycoNet Research Network. It seems like the focus is on the application side or the input side to these research programs. And I wonder whether you have any thoughts on what to do towards the end, and also how that might link with research data management programs that seem to be coming into place as well. So it's not just at the front end, I guess we need to work, but also at the end.
I don't know if any one of Rebecca or Sugita-san, if you wanted to take that question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
If I can start with that. At NSF, we do require data management plans to be submitted with every research proposal. And the focus of the data management plans has been, of course, on how are you going to make the results available more broadly to the community. We're thinking about how to also have these data management plans created in a way that protects the integrity of the data that's going to be released. Again, make sure that it remains open, but also the integrity of it. So for particular programs, there might be additional terms and conditions that require that aspect in data management plans. But more broadly, I spoke about the trust process that we're putting into place to assess these national security risks. And a part of this process that we're piloting is exactly that. How do we assess the potential outcomes, the applications of the research, to make sure that we continue to respect the science? But if there are any concerns about potential harmful outcomes or outcomes that might impact national security, what do we do about that? So as we're thinking through some potential mitigations in that outcomes realm, we're thinking this might be something where we have to provide more information to the principal investigators about, please do continue with your research in the science. Here's some potential harmful outcomes that could result. And we need to have that conversation together about what we do about that to make sure that you can continue to publish on things, but put safeguards in place for those potential outcomes. And so that might require some increased reporting to us to make sure that we're best tracking how the research is going, more information provision, and that type of thing. But I have to say, even in the pilot, it's very difficult because, as we know, what we fund, many times, the fact that we, the government, are funding it means we don't know where the research is going to be going. And it might result in many different outcomes, both those that are going to be beneficial and potentially those that might have national security implications. So I think it's something that's a work in progress, and we're going to be very transparent through our pilot process about what we find and the types of mitigations that were put into place.
Any final words from our panelists?
Please, Sugita-san, please go ahead.
Can I say a few words? Yeah. At JST, we are asking the prospective awardees to submit data management plan, and we are still investigating, but data management plan can be some sort of the mitigation tools. And for example, we can discuss with the PI awardees who can access to the research data and so forth. So yeah, data management plan is kind of the good tools for the mitigation. Thank you.
I'll add very, very briefly in thinking about data management planning, there are ways to work in how to mitigate risk appropriately. And in the same way as what Rebecca was saying, we also in some programs also request risk mitigation plans, which can also include good practices of data management. And the intent of this is to really kind of give a toolkit to researchers to be able to continually manage their risk and have a framework to work on through the duration of their project. But there's also quite a lot of other guidance available. And I'll just add, it is very important to provide tools and information, but it's also very important to provide clear contact points, because I don't think we're expecting researchers to become national security experts overnight. The fact of having officials at at institutions who have knowledge about research security who can be contacted across the granting agencies in Canada. Now we have teams who have growing expertise in this who can be contacted throughout the life cycle of a grant. We have a research security center and regional advisors that are there to support. And it's really trying to pass this message of there is a growing community that wants to support our researchers to try to really kind of put their best foot forward and to manage their research as effectively, responsibly as possible. And it really isn't about trying to find ways to possibly kind of find risks. It's really to find ways to mitigate them and to have clear kind of access points to be able to ask those questions at any point. And so that's an invitation as well for any researchers to, of course, contact my team, contact the Research Security Center, really for advice at any point on these questions.
So one reflection is that doing things internationally has costs and frictions. It doesn't matter what you do, they're there. We have a collective job to try to make those costs and frictions the least off-putting that they can be. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here, trying to find toolkits and simplifications. But I don't think we should expect the costs and frictions won't be there. They will be part of the business of doing science as much as they are part of the business of doing other kinds of science. We as funders, but governments as well, if we wish there to be an international science community, need to acknowledge those costs and make sure that we're building them into our activity. Now, I think that goes for universities as well. Which will need to recognize and acknowledge that this is part of the business that we are in if we're going to be responsible agents. And as I say, it goes both ways. It's not merely a protective, defensive matter. It's also a matter of promoting the openness and integrity of science. So I think as we work collectively through, I think it's important for us to be transparent about those costs and make it clear to our funders like me, but also us as funders making clear to governments that you can't get a good and effective and efficient and well-run system without cost, and that needs to be built into our future planning.
I would just like to emphasize the importance of international collaboration for international understanding and science diplomacy as well.
Here.
Yes, we've gone over time. We started a little bit late. I would just like to thank our panelists. I have many, many more questions, and I'm sure most of you did, about how to simplify the processes, how to further engage, and then as this conversation evolves, what are the most critical next steps. But first, if we could just give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's clear that we need to remain adaptable and responsive as we navigate this rapidly changing landscape. And we've heard the importance of openness, transparency, striking a balance, and above all, critical to continue building trust across nations, internally, nationally, domestically, but internationally as well. And trust with the research community to foster and to protect research and enable an open, collaborative research environment that'll solve today's and our future problems and seize the opportunities. So thank you very much for coming today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.